Today we're going to be counting down 8 of the best mini mirrorless cameras you can buy for under $250, and this is all based on my own hands-on experience with each of them. Now, just to be clear, all of these cameras are absolutely worth owning in their own right, so this is not really a list of good versus bad, but I will be listing them in an order based on my own personal preference, 1 being my favourite and 8 being my not so favourite. It's kind of like listing off your favourite children in order in front of them, just with less childhood trauma. Anyway, kicking off things is the Olympus EPM1, which is actually the smallest mirrorless camera Olympus ever made. Well, so long as you don't count the Olympus Air, which we don't because that thing isn't a mirrorless camera. It's a f***ing monstrosity is what that is. Anyway, despite its toy-like appearance, it does actually have a 12 megapixel 4/3 sensor, a proper mechanical shutter, it also has full manual controls and even supports RAW. The images it captures are pretty damn decent with classic Olympus colors, a respectable amount of dynamic range, and with this being a micro 4/3 camera, you obviously have access to a huge lens catalog that still thrives today. Now, is this the perfect camera? Well, if you were paying attention, you'll have noticed that this has fallen onto number 8 on my list of, well, 8, so no, of course it's not perfect. There's no dedicated mode dial for starters, and the UI is a little bit dated and clunky to navigate. The screen is also fixed in place, which isn't perfect, though you can also buy an EVF add-on for this, which is kinda nice. But my biggest gripe has to be the body. It's ugly as sin and there's no grip, so it's like holding a bar of soap with a lens stuck to the front. So why did this make it to my list, you may be wondering? Well, because the AF is stupidly good for its age, and it's also ridiculously cheap. You can find these knocking around for anywhere between $150 and $200 these days, which makes it a genuinely impressive starter option or even a travel camera, so long as you don't mind other photographers quietly judging you when you're walking around with it. Anyway, this is probably a good point to also mention that the prices that I'll be listing from here on out are based on current going rates that I've found online. Though if you potentially want to save even more money and get even lower prices than what you'd find on the typical auction sites like eBay, then you're gonna want to check out the place that I go to these days to buy all of my used cameras, and that's Buyee, who were also kind enough to sponsor this episode. Now, although they are sponsoring this episode, I do genuinely use Buyee all the time when trying to find new cameras to test out for this channel. And that's because most of the time I can purchase cameras for way cheaper than they would otherwise cost me here on the North American market. Now, if the idea of shopping for gear in Japan sounds like a complicated or scary experience, then honestly, you really don't need to worry because Buyee simplifies all of it. You can browse listings from sites like Yahoo Auctions, Mercari, and Rakuten, which are translated into English or a choice of other languages. You can then place a bid or buy outright, just like you can do on other auction sites. And then when you win, Buyee pretty much handle all of the rest for you, including shipping the item to their Japanese warehouse for inspection, just to make sure you haven't been completely screwed over in the process. Then they'll repackage it and arrange forward shipping straight to your front door. Now, just like any other auction site, you will need to do some digging to find the best possible deals. They're not just going to come up in your face and go, hey, buy me. But usually I manage to grab cameras for around 10 to 20% cheaper than I would otherwise on eBay. Sometimes I'll even get super lucky and find options that are even cheaper than that, so it's definitely worth a look. As always, I'll leave a link in the pinned comment below and in the video description so that you can check out Buyee for yourself. It's completely free to sign up and start browsing through the live auctions, and they even ship worldwide, so what have you got to lose? Anyway, back to the list of cameras, and coming in at number 7 is the Canon M2. This thing is small, it's sleek, and whilst it doesn't scream for attention, it's got plenty going on under the hood, including a decent 18 megapixel APS-C size sensor, a nice large touchscreen on the back, and Canon's signature color science, which is always a bit of a crowd pleaser. You get Wi-Fi connectivity, you get full manual controls, and because it's running Canon's EF-M mount, there's a surprisingly good range of lenses, especially if you want to adapt older EF or FD glass. The handling is solid too, it's light, has a decent grip, and yet it's small enough to slip into your jacket pocket. Also, a little bit of secret sauce to add on top is that you can mod this camera using software called Magic Lantern, and that will allow you to capture 1080p RAW video onto the internal SD card. And it unlocks a metric ton of high-end video features that we won't dive into right now because we've got loads of ground to cover, but I will post my original view up here somewhere so that you can check it out if you want to know more details. So why isn't this camera higher up on the list? Well, the AF isn't the best, and unfortunately it doesn't have a tilt screen, which for low-angle shooting shooters like myself is probably a deal breaker. But priced around $200 to $250, this is still a very solid option. Now this one's for the Sony hipsters. This is the Sony NEX-C3, and it was one of Sony's earliest mirrorless experiments, and honestly, it's aged like a bottle of red from Aldi. Surprisingly well considering the price you actually paid for it. It has a 16 megapixel APS-C sensor, a tilting screen, and compatibility with Sony's E-mount lens system, which is the exact same mount that they use today, so there are plenty of lens options to pick from. This camera is light, small, very beginner friendly. The autofocus is, well, kind of mid, but for casual street snappers, portraits, and even travel, it can definitely do the job. My biggest gripe though is with the UI, because back in the day, Sony hadn't quite nailed their menu system layout, and this can be a bit of a confusing mess to navigate until you get used to it. Plus, whilst the build quality is, well, fine, it does feel a bit more plasticky than the other options in this list. So if you were looking for premium build quality, this probably isn't your guy. But for between $140 and $180, you really can't complain all that much, and it's a great entry point into the Sony ecosystem. Next is the Nikon 1J5, and this could very well be one of the best mini mirrorless cameras that no one ever bought, and that's exactly why I have such a soft spot for this thing. Inside it houses a 20.8 megapixel 1-inch sensor, and before you start, yes, that is smaller than APS-C.
I can't even see anything, it's so small.
But don't write it off just yet, because what you get in return is speed. This thing is insanely quick. It offers 20 frames per second burst shooting with full autofocus, or you can go up to 60 frames if you're okay with the focus being locked off. The AF system is also quicker than a Virgin on prom night. I mean, not speaking from experience, so I've heard. It also looks fantastic. The design is vintage inspired, the screen flips out, making it great for candid shooting, and it's genuinely fun to use. Well, like 95% fun to use, because there are, of course, going to be some cons. Firstly, it only uses micro SD cards, which can negatively impact the write speeds, especially when shooting in the faster burst modes. Plus, the lens range is fairly limited since Nikon binned off the One system a while back now. But honestly, my biggest gripe with this specific model is the stupid Wi-Fi button. Now, if you press this by mistake, it'll lock up the camera for around 8 seconds whilst it tries to connect to the Wi-Fi. And you can't deactivate it. Once you've started, it won't stop unless you want to turn the camera off and on again. Either way, you have to sit there and wait until it realizes, oh yeah, there isn't any Wi-Fi to connect to. But if you can manage to see past those flaws, then for between $220 and $250, honestly, it shoots like a camera that's worth double that amount. So coming in at number 4 is just about the only affordable Fujifilm camera left these days, and that's the XA1. Now, unlike its sexier sibling, the original XM1, which sells for way more than this thing does, this XA1 didn't get an X-Trans sensor. Instead, it uses a standard 16 megapixel Bayer array, which Fujifilm purists may scoff at. But honestly, that's actually a good thing, because it means that prices for this camera have remained very reasonable. You still get some of Fuji's legendary film simulation modes, albeit a much less extensive list to choose from than the more modern releases, and it supports the full range of Fujifilm X-mount lenses. You also get a nice flip-up screen, manual controls, and a surprisingly well-built camera that costs around $230 to $250 these days. The downsides are that there isn't a viewfinder, but as you've probably already noticed, that's kind of common for cameras of this size and price. There's no touchscreen, and whilst the AF is okay, it's certainly not the fastest camera in the world. But for photographers who want a good-looking camera on a budget, this punches well above its weight. Now, this next one is kind of a dark horse. This is the Panasonic GF9, also known as the GX850 or GX800, depending on where you live in the world. This is essentially just a cheaper but slightly larger Panasonic GM1, which is a camera that I recently dubbed as being one of the best mini mirrorless cameras ever made. Anyway, this one has the same 16 megapixel 4/3 sensor as the GM1, but it can also capture 4K video, which the GM1 can't. It also has a flip-up screen, better handling, and a solid AF system. And because it uses the micro 4/3 mount, you've got access to a huge library of lenses. Now, the only slight downside to this camera is that you may need to do a little bit of creative accountancy if you want to keep it under the totally arbitrary and non-binding $250 price cap that I've set for myself, and in doing so have made this video infinitely harder to produce. Good job, Tom. You see, body only, this tends to sell for around $300, but sometimes you can get lucky and find them closer to $250, especially on Buy. But if you can't find one cheaper, then often you will find copies for sale for around $300 to $350 with a lens thrown in, probably the 14 to 42mm kit lens, which is exactly what mine came with, and I paid around $300 all in. Now, this lens routinely sells for around $100 to $150 on auction sites, so once you've sold it on, technically you only paid around $200 or maybe even $150 for the camera all in. That still counts, right? Anyway, whilst some of you angry lot at the back there run off to fetch your pitchforks after that shameful display of mathematic gymnastics, I also need to mention that if you do buy this camera from Japan, like I did, then in order to change the language from Japanese to English, there is a bit of a process to doing this, unfortunately. Luckily though, I'm not going to bore the piss out of you explaining it here, and I have made a step-by-step guide for you, which you can view for free on my website using the link in the pinned comment below. Hopefully you're not too mad now.
Now you've got Norfolk's maddest man.
Anyway, let's now talk about the number 2 spot in this lineup, which is actually another camera from the discontinued Nikon 1 range. So if the Nikon J5 that we spoke about earlier was kind of the scrappy underdog of the Nikon 1 line, then this V3 has to be the more refined bigger brother. And I'm saying all of this as my younger brother is editing this video for me, so I'm sure he won't take retribution on me for that statement.
You got the dud!
It's bigger built, it has better controls, and it also benefits from a semi-modular design that actually makes it feel like a real camera. I mean, if you want it to, because you can also choose to strip it back entirely and make it as pocketable as you like. And it's this versatility that I believe makes this such a useful camera to own. Just like the J5, you get the same blazing fast burst rates and quick and accurate autofocus. And although this model does have a slightly older 18.4 megapixel 1-inch sensor, the image quality is still very strong, and when paired with a fast lens, you can even squeeze out a bit of depth of field, well, if you focus close enough. Yes, this is all part of a long dead camera system, but for between $220 and $250, you're getting something that's small, powerful, and genuinely feels fun to shoot with. And so finally, we're on to the top doggy, the number 1 spot, the OG, if you will. I am talking about the mighty Olympus OMD EM10. Now, if there's one camera on this list that hits the perfect blend of size, performance, handling, and price, then this is it. You get a 16 megapixel 4/3 sensor, a proper mechanical shutter, 3-axis IBIS, built-in EVF, a flip-out screen, twin control dials, a dedicated mode dial, more custom buttons and switches than you'll ever need in one lifetime, and a beautiful retro design that feels solid as hell in the hand. I mean, what more do you want?
I've on a toilet made out of solid gold, but it's just not in the cards now, is it?
The autofocus is very fast and accurate, even by 2025 standards. The image quality is remarkably good, and overall, this is such a joy to shoot with. Also, shameless plug alert, I do need to mention that all of the images you see here and the photos taken with the previous 7 cameras were all shot in RAW and then edited in Lightroom using my own presets, which you can buy on my website. And because you made it this far in the video and didn't click away at my cringeworthy jokes, be sure to check out the discount code in the pinned comment below to save yourself a little extra cash if you do want to buy them. Anyway, whether you're a beginner looking to step up from a phone or a seasoned photographer wanting a fun little backup body to shoot with at the weekends, this EM10 is perfectly catered to just about any skill level. And with a price tag of around $250, this is easily one of the best budget mirrorless cameras you can currently buy. But if you don't mind a slightly larger camera and you can stretch your budget a little further, then before you buy that one, check out the OMD EM1 first, because that's an even better option in my opinion, and you can click up here somewhere if you want to learn more about that.